welcome to From the Nightmares of Hyde Denny, and this is Commission 18 of Feral Dolls. So for this project I was commissioned to recreate my client's video game character into a doll. They provided me these reference photos of the character from different angles and a color palette, as well as close-ups of face-up and outfit details. And initially they asked me to choose an Ever After High doll as a base, and I was a bit confused since where do you see these proportions on an Ever After High doll? So I asked them maybe we should choose a different body as a base with more muscle in it. So I was very tempted to use one of these DC superhero girl dolls that my amazing subscriber Elisa sent me as a gift. They actually sent me an entire package of dolls, which I'm going to make something for you, Elisa, like I promise. Just wait until I have some free time, okay? So basically at first I wanted to use this first doll, but then I thought that this Tatsu Yamashiro aka Katara doll has a similar face mold to the character, but then I was like, none of them really match with the character. So then I remembered about that one BTS doll that I bought for my client's boyfriend, and I thought I might send their pictures and see if this current client of mine will approve him for this project. And they did, so I ended up using V from BTS for this custom. And I'm no longer going to complain about this outfit, you already know how I feel about it from the boyfriend video. So I just removed all that and began the usual preparation process. The mold again was very well sculpted, though I'm not sure if it actually looked like the idol or not. And also, one thing that I've noticed is that the head sculpt was painted black, yet the hair was blonde and pink with a side dye, which I'm not sure why they did that, but anyhow, I warmed his head with my hairdryer and then I removed it from his neck. Then I cut out all his hair and removed the hair plugs with tweezers. And then I removed his raster face, which it was a bit difficult this time, so I guess people were not over exaggerating this entire face removal issue. But after a while of rubbing the raster out, this is how it looked, and you can also compare this mold to the chin mold. But anyhow, I began repainting his face, and from now on I'm going to refer him as her, cause my client told me that this is a female character. It's supposed to be an athletic, muscular girl. They also mentioned that the appearance is based on Limp Beef Patty, and I'm not really familiar with them either, I'm sorry. They just sent me their pictures as reference photos for this custom. But anyhow, I blushed her face to paint it light purple, and then I began painting the eyes, and they also had a scar. Client mentioned that it's supposed to look like the scar of Zuko from Avatar Last Airbender, so I tried my best to resemble it. Also, while I'm repainting, please take your time to subscribe, cause from the analytics I can see that only 26% of my viewers are subscribed. I mean, it's free and for you it takes a second, and for me it gives the opportunity to continue working and existing on this channel. But anyhow, I painted this texture with white acrylics trying to resemble the scar line edges. Then off camera I painted her scleras, and then I also darkened her eye shape. I blushed her upper and lower eyelids with pastels, and then I drew her irises and darkened her pupils. I gave her some smoky eyeliner and then I darkened her eye crease. Then I blushed her lips with purple pastels. And then I blushed her cheeks, forehead and chin. And then I contoured her jawline. Also, initially I struggled a bit since I'm not really used to painting on realistic face molds, and this face mold was based on a real human being, yet my client's concept was a fantasy character, so it was really hard to paint the eyes to look fantasy-esque on this mold. So the first time I painted the shape, it ended up looking like a regular dude, so I erased them and repainted it once again, and this time I choose more of a stretched eye shape, kind of like a fox eye, and a smaller irises with really strong trendy eyeliner. Even though it wasn't really present in the reference photos, my client was okay with me doing like twists and creative liberties in general. And then I also painted the animalistic nose thing, which I don't really like this in custom, so I was like, how I make something that I dislike look good, so I decided to paint very like Art Nouveau-esque lines over that, and finally ended up looking good to the point that I did the same motifs on her scar and lips. Since I mean, realism isn't always looking good on a concept like this. I mean, the mold looks like an ordinary dude when I painted the eyes and the scar realistically, so it really needed a fantasy face up to neutralize the mold, cause this isn't a fantasy Monster High mold where the mold alone can pull the look. But anyhow, I have been doing these lines and I really kind of wanted them to resemble either like veins or, you know, when people get hit by a thunder and their skin has this beautiful texture to it. Also, I'm not sure if calling a texture like this beautiful is appropriate, since it definitely damages someone's health. But I don't know, I spent a really long time doing this, and in the end I outlined them with white acrylic paint to give it more depth. And I also drew the same motifs on her lips. Once I finished the face up, I sanded her body and then I blushed it with pastels to match the color to the head. By the way, it's very important to sand the body before blushing it, cause if you miss that step, all that blush and paint will eventually chip off, since it needs a sanded surface to stick and hold into. I also blushed her body with Pearl X powders. Then I began making a wig for her. First I dyed her alpaca hair. I needed to do very like pastel ombre of blues and greens, so I used reed dye this time and I dyed them on a stove while the dye was boiling, and then I made wefts of camera and began attaching them to this wig cap that I made out of 3 layers of tulle and tacky glue. And I'm not sure if my explanation of this part is even necessary. I mean, you saw me and probably other doll customizers make wigs with the same exact technique. I just make sure that I'm cutting and styling every weft section that I attach before gluing another layer, cause this way styling the wig overall is much easier. I also used an eyebrow razor to blend the weft sections together. Now this part is new, so I have to explain. So the concept art has this really anime-esque hairstyle, so in order to do these hairs scattered in triangle shapes, I diluted some tacky glue in water, and then I mixed it and applied it to the wefts. I kind of squished one part to make it pointy, but it didn't really look good at first. So I used an eyebrow razor to loosen up the hairs, and then I applied the tacky glue liquid again and shaped it, and it looked way better this time. I mean, you can hold this pose with a hairstyling product, but this technique is more affordable and it's also water-based, so the hair won't get like gelled up in some nasty styling product at the end. And after a few sections, this is how it looked. I kept doing this until I fully covered her roots. We will go back to this at the end of this project, but now let's make the scarf. Not sure why I started with the scarf, probably because it requires some embroidery work and I absolutely love doing embroidery. It's very like suiting for me, so I began drawing the pattern. At first I did it wrong, so I had to repeat this once again. So I took my time to draw the correct pattern next to this. Anyways, I wanted to fill those triangles green, however, it just looks so ugly like this that I ended up cutting them and I decided to line stitch the whole thing. I redid this again, but this time I began doing the rectangles first, and also I made sure that each side has exactly 7 stitches. You can pause for a second and count them, and I will ask the same thing to my client. That's how exact I wanted this to be. And then I did the small ones, and each side of the rectangle had like 3 stitches this time. And then I did the rest, but with a different color, I mean matching with the reference photos. And they also had an exact number of stitches for each side, by the way. And then I line stitched the triangles. Once I finished this, I cut it out and then I folded and pinned it and line stitched with my sewing machine. Then I used the safety pin to flip it inside out or right side out, I don't know. This was really difficult because I chose a very stiff fabric, which was really great for embroidery but difficult to flip, so it took me some time to flip it. Here I almost did it, just needed to flip this edge as well. And this is how the scarf looked at the end. I also needed to imitate like loose threads dangling from the edges to make it look like crocheted or something. I mean, I could learn crocheting, but the pattern was a bit complicated and I don't really have any experience in crocheting stuff. But anyhow, once I finished that, I began working on her outfits. I rolled this body in some kitchen rub, and then I taped it with paper tape, and then I drew the lines where I'm going to do the cuts, and then I cut it out. I traced that on paper and then on fabric off camera, and this is how the patterns looked. I cut them out. In the reference photo she has bishop sleeves, and I showed how to make them previously, but basically you take the regular sleeve pattern and then you cut them into slices and then you glue that on paper and then you trace the shape of your bishop pattern. I did all that and then I began gathering the sleeve edges in pleats. And then I stitched the sleeves to the top. Most of you always point out how tiny and equal my stitches are, so let me show you them more up close this time. Okay, now I needed to stitch the regular sleeves to the bishop ones, so I did that as well. And once I finished attaching all these pieces together, I hand stitched the edges. This is how it ended up looking at the end, so I flipped it inside out. At this stage I hemmed the edges and then I stitched some tiny buttons on that. I bought them from Etsy, by the way. The link is under the video description. Okay, I almost finished stitching the sleeves. We will come back to them at the end, but now let's make the bolero. I already traced patterns and the ornaments that I'm currently embroidering. Obviously I could just paint this, but I really wanted to take my time and do embroidery. I think it would look really well with the scarf, so I did some light purple embroidery, and then for the depth I also did some green ones as well. Then I did the back pieces and I added the green lines again. I also did the same things to the sleeves, however, this time I also added some blue thread to the mix. In the end, I cut out all these pieces and then I stitched them all together, and this is how it looked. At first I was so unsure about this, but in the end it all came out the way I wanted. At this stage I also cut out the pattern pieces to do the lining. This was my first time doing lining, so I was very nervous. So I stitched all these lines that I'm currently showing you. I stitched them all together. I just left sleeves open so that I will flip it inside out. And I'm really sorry I didn't record this part very well. I mean, my battery died and I didn't have enough time for charging. So I flipped it and then I ironed all these edges. And I was so happy because lining fabric is sort of the only thing I didn't know how to do, and I have never tried it until this point, so I was really happy with the result actually. All I needed to do here is to attach the cuffs and the sleeves with all the straps with buckles. So I made this off camera and then I decorated them with rhinestones. I also made all these belts by hand. At the back of it, it also had another layer. Not sure what to call this, but I made that as well. And then I stitched it in place. And then I began making her pants. I used the polyester pants from the BTS doll to trace the fabric. And I cut out this pattern. Then I cut out the pants and I stitched them together following this line. And this is how it looked. I also wanted to make the pockets functioning because why not? So I did that. Not sure how to explain this, guys. I mean, it's so obvious. Just take a look at it and do the way I did here. I mean, I didn't even watch a tutorial for this. Just take one of your pants, flip it and see how it's made and you will get the principle. So in here I placed the other pockets and then I hand stitched it. And I also stitched her back pockets as well. Then I needed to hem the bottom edges of her pants, and while I was editing this part, I thought that I actually machine stitched this, but apparently I hand stitched, which is so time consuming. I have no idea why I did it by hand. And this step was completely unnecessary, but I pinned this line to make sure that the line that I stitched will be very even. I also stitched another line near it, but this time green. But anyways, I finally placed this to stitch the pockets and my sewing machine got stuck. I have no idea what's wrong with me. Anytime I want to stitch something and record it, it always gets stuck. So I did this off camera and this is how it looked. And then I flipped them inside out. I also spent some time line stitching some green threads so that the pants will look more stylish, like I don't know. I did this to the sides and the pockets just overall everywhere. And then I also made a belt for it. And I also stitched these snap closures to the back of it. And then I added the buckle of camera and put the pants on. Forgot to say I used silk to make them so that the texture of it will look expensive glossy, I don't know. Then it was time to make her boots. I began as usual by cutting all the pieces out of Worbla thermoplastics, and then I warmed them up on a candle and attached them to the feet to get the shape. Once I sculpted the shape, I removed them off her feet, and then I marked the parts where I'm going to cut them, and then I cut all these pieces out. And this is what I've ended up with. Now, I no longer really use Worbla's texture without wrapping anything over it anymore, since I really hate its OG texture that much, so I ended up wrapping all these pieces that I've just cut in leather imitation. I sort of stretched the leather to make it sit flat, and then I stitched it to keep it stay in place. And then I cut out the excess leather, and then I did the same steps for the rest of the pieces, but without stitching it, just like super glued them. And again, speaking of outdated techniques, nowadays I would never do the boots this way. I would just make it out of leather imitation without wrapping Worbla with it. Then I did this hose to put some eyelets in. These are the smallest size possible to find on the internet. I believe link is under the video description. So I placed them in, and then I tried to lace them. I placed them a bit uneven, but I think it's still fine, I mean. Then I used the shoe pattern to trace and cut out the platforms and heels out of Worbla. I cut out a few layers of them, then I sandwiched them one over the other. Now this part of her boots had some golden ornaments, so I drew them. Then I painted them using a fabric paint that's also made for leather. Then I sort of gathered and glued and constructed the shoes while they were on her feet, since I mean they are not really removable at this point. I mean, why would you even want to remove this? You might damage the paint or break something. It's an art doll, like not really made for dress up. So I glued those pieces on, and then I painted the boots with a layer of metallic fabric paint to give it even more like shiny texture. Then I made her belt. I stitched this red line to its edge. And then I placed all these leathery straps on, but before I glued them, I needed to decorate them with rhinestones and beads and rings. So I glued and stitched all these details, and the belt was done. And again, we will take a look at it in the end. And from here on, I began doing the final touches and gathering all the things that I made on this doll. First I painted and glossed the platforms, then I laced them and added the green rhinestones. Then I rolled her legs in bandages. And then I made these knee pads and painted them and mostly made them of camera. And then I attached them to her knees. Then I stitched some beads to her shirt, which I kind of wish I had more like detailed ornaments to stitch, cause just take a look at the reference photos, the shapes, they were more like ornamental and I've just stitched beads, which is a bit annoying. I put the bolero on off camera and then I added the belt. She also had some tiny gloves, so I quickly made them out of leather and I stitched beads over it. Then after 5 months later, I finally removed these wraps of her face. This doll head had been sitting on my shelf for such a long time. I mean, all these commissions, I have been working on them at the same time, so that's why it took me so long to finish. In the end, I glued her wig to her head and then I reconnected her head to her body, and the doll was finally done. I honestly cannot believe that this project is over, cause my client actually commissioned this in May of 2022 and I fully finished working on this doll in January of 2023, and the re-edited version of this video is coming out in February of 2024. So almost 2 years passed already, that's absolutely insane. But anyways guys, I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe, like this video if you liked it of course, and feel free to comment anything. I love reading all your comments. In the end, as always, I would like to thank my amazing Patreons: Smoogish, Curdula Seagull, Awkward Burp, Purple Pixie, Flying Bacheloress, Angela Reed, Est K, Anna Drazdova, Linda K, Stephanie Good, Robin Wenderbush, Josephine Falk, Myria, and Maureen A. If you feel like joining us there and getting early access to my upcoming videos and seeing the work in progress of my projects and making it possible for me to recreate Wings Fairies in their Enchantix forms as well as Belle's live action dress, the link is under the video description. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and now enjoy the end result pictures, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.